Hello. Oh, great. Welcome to the Montclair Art Museum and to our second free first Thursday night of the season. My name is Leah Fox. I'm the director of the Vance Wall Art Education Center here at the museum. And I hope that you are all having a really great evening here, not just for this program, but for the whole evening of tours and other events happening around the whole museum. Many of our activities during Free First Thursdays are based on community-generated programming like this and like some of the tables and other things happening in the museum. And I just want to take a moment to thank TD Bank for making our Free First Thursday nights possible. Our programming is also made possible through the support of our museum members. So if you are a member, I just want to say thank you for being here tonight. And if you are not yet a member, we hope that you'll consider because membership provides free admission, discounts in the store, discounts in classes, and a whole variety of other great perks that really are not to be missed. So if you are interested, come see any one of us who work at the museum, and we're more than happy to talk with you about that membership experience. Before we begin tonight's program, I just ask you to silence your cell phones. So we're thrilled to host tonight's conversation that's part of the Open Book, Open Mind series through the Montclair Public Library. We welcome best-selling authors B.A. Shapiro in conversation with Carolyn Leavitt, discussing B.A. Shapiro's latest book, The Collector's Apprentice, a historical thriller of art, revenge, and love set in 1920s Paris and America. I want to thank the Montclair Public Library for their partnership tonight and in the many ways that we partner with the public library throughout the year. And I want to welcome Salwa Shami, the Assistant Director of the library, to the stage. Thank you all.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. I would like to thank the Montclair Art Museum for our wonderful partnership and for hosting this Open Book, Open Mind event tonight. I'd also like to thank our series supporters. We've received grants from the Montclair Foundation and Investors Foundation, and we're thrilled to have been awarded once again these grants for the coming year. And so we're very thankful for our partners. Before I introduce the authors, I wanted to bring your attention to our last Open Book, Open Mind event for the year. It's on November 22nd, and it's Jodi Kantor and Megan Toohey in conversation with Matt Purdy. The book is She Said, Breaking the Sexual Harassment Story That Helped Ignite a Movement. And that will take place at the Central Presbyterian Church because we're expecting a big crowd. We already have almost 200 people registered, and tickets are still available. You can go to montclairlibrary.org/openbook. Now to introduce our authors. B.A. Shapiro is the New York Times bestselling author of The Muralist, The Art Forger, The Safe Room, Blind Spot, See No Evil, Blameless, and Shattered Echoes. She has also written 4 screenplays and the nonfiction book, The Big Squeeze. The Art Forger has been on many bestseller lists, including the New York Times, Boston Globe, LA Times, Minneapolis, Star Tribune, Amazon and Kindle, and has won many awards, including the 2013 New England Book Award for fiction. She lives in Boston and is working on her 8th novel. Caroline Leavitt is the New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of many novels, including Is This Tomorrow?, Pictures of You, Girls in Trouble, Living Other Lives, and Into Thin Air. Several of her novels have been Editor's Choice and Best Picks of the Year and have won awards. Her many essays, stories, book reviews, and articles have appeared in Salon, Psychology Today, the New York Times Sunday Book Review, Publishers Weekly, People, Real Simple, New York Times Magazine, the San Francisco Chronicle, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, and numerous anthologies. She teaches novel writing online at both Stanford University and UCLA Extension Writers Program, as well as working with writers privately. So let's welcome Caroline and B.A. Shapiro.
Hello? I think this is right.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear us? Everything's okay? Okay, great. First, I want to thank everyone for coming here on this rainy night, and I want to thank the museum for inviting us to this beautiful space, and most of all, I want to thank Barbara for allowing me to come and interview her. I've known Barbara for a very long time. I had just started as an author with Algonquin, and Barbara came on, she just sold her first novel, and we were both going to go to an Algonquin party together. And I thought, oh, that's cool. So I met her in Soho, and I was, of course, in my all-black attire. And there's this woman coming down the street to me like this exotic, beautiful parrot. She had this wild scarf on and this bright dress and this big smile. And the most amazing thing about her was her radiance. She's a brilliant writer, she's a brilliant editor, and she's also a really brilliant friend. And I'm just deliriously happy to be talking with you today. So cheers. Okay, so the first question I want to talk to you about is your first two novels in the trilogy were about painting and art. And what was really fascinating to me was the third one was about art collecting, which you could say is really an art in itself, couldn't you? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, collecting art is an art, and as curating art in a museum is art. And people, real collectors, feel that they're purchasing the art for themselves, but also it's for posterity, that they are caretakers for the art, and they curate their own collections thinking about this. And as I interviewed collectors and read about this and started thinking about what a fabulous thing it was to be able to do this, I decided to incorporate more and more into the collector's apprentice.
You know, the thing also that interests me the most is everybody always thinks that Van Gogh was discovered by Theo, his brother, but it was actually Theo's wife, Jo, who made Van Gogh, and nobody knows that, and that always sort of irritates me that nobody knows that. So how does one make a name as an art collector? How do you go about doing that today?
Well, some people want to make names as art collectors, and other people don't. They just want to collect the art. Some collectors have a very clear vision of a particular time or a particular type of artist, and that's what they want to focus on in their collection. Other people just want to buy what they love, and other people are buying because they think that it's a good investment. Some people leave it to their children. Many people leave their collections to museums, so that it really is a caretaker type of relationship.
There's a character in your book, Bradley, who makes a big deal of not wanting people to see his collection because he's kind of snobby. He thinks they won't understand. It's sort of those people who, I don't understand art, but I know what I like. Do you think personally that he's correct, that there's only one way to understand art? Because it seems to me that when people read books, depending on what you bring to the book yourself, you're going to have a different reaction to it.
Yeah, there's no one way to appreciate art, but my character, Edwin Bradley, is based on the character Albert Barnes. I don't know if any of you know him and his museum in Philadelphia. And he was just this crazy collector. He was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He saw the post-impressionists before he recognized their greatness and the greatness of what they were doing way before anybody else did. And he collected Matisse and Cézanne and Picasso, and he brought this collection to Philadelphia from Paris. And he wanted everybody to know, he wanted to turn Philadelphia on to the great art that was starting to be recognized in Europe. But no one in Philadelphia thought they were all so great, and they laughed at him and said, "You're a fool, and these men, Cézanne and Matisse, are just idiots. Everybody knows the sky isn't blue. Everybody knows a woman doesn't have 3 eyes." And so, because he was kind of an arrogant jerk, he said, "Okay, these people don't appreciate the art that I have. I'm just going to keep it for myself, and only a few select people and a few select students are going to be able to see this art." Well, originally in Philadelphia in the 1920s, this was okay because nobody thought it was all that good. But by the 1980s, when everybody knew that Matisse and Cézanne and Picasso were not idiots and were not out of their minds, they wanted to see his paintings, and he still said no. And that's one of the questions at the center of this book is, who owns art? If you bought, we live in a capitalist society. He built this beautiful building to house his art, and he purchased it, he bought it, and in his will, he said all of these pieces had to stay in the building, and they had to stay exactly where they were. And then his will was broken after he died, and everything was moved into Center City, Philadelphia. Well, on one hand, now everybody could see these marvelous paintings that are a part of our culture, that are artifacts of our culture, versus when they were in his home, nobody could see them. On the other hand, he built the building, he bought the paintings, and he wrote in his will, and that's where he wanted it to stay, and it didn't. So what's right and what's wrong? And so I played around a lot with that in the book.
And it was great. It was so, so interesting. The thing that really got me is you talk a lot about, in your whole trilogy, about forgeries. And if you think in terms of if somebody had, or you have a beautiful Degas forgery in her apartment, and you would walk in and you feel, oh, that's beautiful, I want to see it, I love it, and it's a forgery. So that's a deliberate forgery. We could call it an interpretation, maybe it's a better word. But how does that really diminish your pleasure in it? I mean, it's a really interesting
It's a very
question
interesting
to
question.
think about.
It just happened to Prince Charles.
Yeah.
You know, they found that a number of paintings that he had purchased and were on display at one of his charities were forgeries. So that does, so all this time, all these people took great pleasure looking at these paintings and feeling that they were real, and now they're fake. So does that decrease the pleasure or not? And so I've spoken about this issue a lot, and I was at an art museum in Massachusetts, and the 2 people in the audience got up and started yelling at each other during the Q&A. And yeah, it was really great. Yeah, it was really great. And one was saying, you know, this is a work of art. This was created by the artist. The forger doesn't have an idea. He or she only is copying what that person's idea is. And the other person was saying, well, if a forgery can give pleasure and people respond to it and it makes them think about art and enjoy art, then what's wrong with it? And they were really going at it. It was good. I just sat up here and smiled.
What do you think, though? How do you think about it?
I think that obviously a forgery is a copy. Although some forgers make pastiche, which is where they look at an artist's body of work and they create a painting that is new, but fills like a gap somewhere where the artist hadn't painted for a few years, or combines things, and then they put it out there as a discovered painting. So that is kind of a new painting, but they're still taking their ideas from the original artist. And it's not the same. I mean, it just is, even though it can look the same, it's not the same.
Is it like fan fiction?
Yeah, it's like fan fiction, right? It's just like fan fiction. It just is, and as the character in my book, The Art Forger, she makes a living creating these, they're not forgeries. Right. You know when you buy them that they are recreated masterpieces. And people know that, and you can go online and you can buy anything, and you can spend $100,000 to get a Matisse painting that looks like Matisse's painting, even though it isn't. And if you want to do that, that's cool. But it becomes a forgery when the forger claims it is the work of the original artist and then sells it as that. So that's the distinction between copy and forgery.
Okay. So you did all this research, detailed, incredible research about artists and painting, and you're a writer. So where did the two, what did you learn from how painters work that you could apply to writing?
Oh, there's so many things.
Really? Like
yeah,
what?
There's so many things that are the same because I interviewed many painters and watched them work and talked to them about their careers. And I think that in all of the creative arts, there are a lot of similarities because you have people, whether they're writers or painters or dancers or actors or anything, who feel driven to do something creative. And there's this huge pyramid where only the people at the very top get recognized. So the struggle both to deal with your creativity and get it out there and feel good about it, and the struggle to be recognized and get viewers or readers or audiences is very, very similar. I mean, it just struck me. And also the whole creative process. Like we write novels, and so you plan the novel, and then you start, and then you go back, and then you start, and you go back, and you rewrite it, and then you restructure it, and you do all of these different things. And that's what artists are doing too. They have an idea, and then they start it, and then they recreate it, and then they take it apart, and then they put it back up again. And so it's not all that different.
Right. You know, as long as you brought that up, let's talk about writing and structure. There are like two groups of writers. There's a group of writers who sit around and they wait for the muse, and they think the muse is going to give them all these great ideas, and they're going to sit there and type for an hour, and then all of a sudden, here's my novel, and it's great. Barbara and I are not those writers. We're the kind of writers who we map everything out, and we have to know where we're going. And we've talked about this a lot, but this is your night, so you talk about it. You tell us, like, how do you map out your novels? You start with an idea, obviously, and then what do you do? Walk us through the process.
Well, this is kind of weird, but I actually have a PhD in sociology, and my area of expertise is statistics. So I use statistical methods to write my novels. You probably don't know, because I made it up, that every story follows a normal curve. This is true of your main plot, your secondary plots, your subplots, your character arcs, and this normal curve can be divided into 4 equal parts, which correspond to the 4-act story structure. So I do that. I map out my main plot and all the subplots and everything according to this 4-act structure. I also use bubblegrams where I have all the different characters and what their relationships are and how everybody knew everybody. Because if this person met that person, maybe they had to have this person here to get them to know each other. So in The Collector's Apprentice, it was like my second or third draft, and I made a bubblegram of the characters. And I realized that at the center of the story, Gertrude Stein, because all of these artists, it takes place in Paris and Philadelphia, and all of these artists and collectors and intellectuals met at Gertrude Stein's salon. And that told me that I had to beef up Gertrude Stein's participation in the book. So I do that. I also have a very favorite chart. I do lots of charts, but my favorite chart is I give stress coefficients to every scene that I write. So it's about tension. So you can't have a scene that has no tension in it, because that would be boring and everybody would go to sleep. But sometimes you have to have scenes that have less tension in them.
Right.
So I give those scenes a 0.25 on the tension chart. If you have more tension, then it's 0.5 up. If there's a lot of tension, like 2 or 3 of the plots and subplots are coming together in one scene, 0.75. And if it's a really, really big scene, it gets the big 1.0, which corresponds back to those 4 places on the normal curve.
Oh my God.
And then I do something very sophisticated. It's very, very sophisticated. I use multicolored file cards.
Yeah, I use those too. Those are good. Those are good.
Very good. And I plot out each one of the characters' arcs and each one of the scenes that they're going to be in, and then I move all the cards around and come up with a stack that represents the plot of the novel. And then I take that stack upstairs to my study and I start writing. But then I finish a draft and it's all wrong. So I have to start the whole process again. And I do it again. And I do it again. But now I'm going to tell a story on Caroline.
Oh.
So she's working on a book and her timeline is
They're always
confused.
off.
And she's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I can't get these people right. What year is this? And she sends me an email. She goes, so if this person was born here and that person was born there, then how old are they when this happened? I'm like, Caroline, figure out their birthdays. If you figure out their birthdays, then you will be able to figure out exactly how old everybody is in the trajectory of the future. And
it worked. It worked. I printed out, this is so loud too. I'm sorry. I printed out all the calendars and I wrote out all their dates and when they met. And now, when somebody is 12 in summer, they're not going to be 42 when summer turns into fall. They're going to be the right age. Okay, so I want to ask you, what did you discover in writing this book that you didn't expect that was a surprise for you?
One of the things about The Collector's Apprentice, which I kind of knew, but it really, hit me really strongly, was how, with art, as with so many other things, we are reluctant to accept anything that's new. So this story is about the post-impressionists, particularly about Matisse, who is the love object in the story. And so I had to go back through time and figure out, who were the precursors to the post-impressionists. So first there were all of the realistic painters, and then there were the impressionists. And when the impressionists started playing with light, they were still doing representational things, but it was different. And everybody said they were fools. And then they got accepted, and they were wonderful artists. And then the post-impressionists came in, and the pointillists came in, and all of these, the Fauves, and all of them were trying to, keep expanding on the idea of the impressionists. And when they started doing this, everybody said they were fools. And then the post-impressionists got accepted, and then they turned to abstract art. And suddenly Picasso was an idiot. Moreau didn't know what he was talking about. And this whole idea that we are so enamored of what we know and where we are, and how slowly we are able or willing to accept what is new and different, whether we're talking technology or art or a new style of writing. And it just fascinates me. Why is that? Why do we do this over and over and over again?
Part of it's excitement, part of it is fear, I think. And speaking of excitement and fear, I want to ask you about your new novel, if I can. Is that okay to talk about?
Okay.
Okay, so you've done this.
My editor's in the audience, as is my publisher.
You've done this amazing trilogy all about art, set in different time periods, and you've done it brilliantly. So now you're coming back to the present time, which is very different. Have you found that it felt like a brand new book and you had to do a brand new process? And what was that process?
So the truth is that Caroline is one of my readers, so she has already read a rough draft of this one. So I decided that I wanted to write something completely different after the trilogy. And I was going to have it take place in the present day because I was tired of all of the historical research. I was going to have it be just one major character because I always have all these different characters and they're always jumping around in time. It was going to take place just at one particular period of time, and it was not going to be about art. So that was the plan. It does take place, the other thing is I live in Boston. I wanted to take place in Boston because that would be really easy for me. So it does take place in the present. It does take place in Boston. It has 7 viewpoint characters. It does jump around in time a little bit. And I have a photographer who is a fabulous artist. I have a character who is an art historian who develops the photographer's photographs. And I have a woman who is doing found art. So I didn't really get as far away from what I wanted to get from it. But I also said, okay, I'm going to write like those people who just sit down. I have tons of friends who say, okay, they put their hands on the keyboard and somebody comes and talks to them. This has never happened to me.
Who does that?
But I can give you the list of names. There's, I don't know. I think they're making it up.
I think they're making it up. They must be making it up.
They say that this is what happens. So I'm going to believe them. So I said, okay, I'm going to do that. And I came up with these 7 different characters, and I wrote a chapter on each one of them and created them. And I will admit, I did create charts that said, name, age, earliest trauma, relationship with mother, schooling, general rationalization, other defense mechanisms, things like that. But I created the characters and I wrote chapters. And this took me about 6 months. And then I'm like, now what? I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. Nobody's coming and talking to me. So I got out my normal curve charts and my multicolored file cards. And I figured it all out. And I laid all the multicolored file cards on the dining room table and moved them all around until I had a stack of cards. And then I sat down, and in the next 6 months, I wrote the first draft. Okay. So sometimes you just got to stick with what you know.
What you do best. What you do best. So did it scare you in the writing?
Oh, yeah.
What do you do when you get scared? How do you keep working?
I write it wrong. I just say, okay, I've got my 5-page minimum that I'm going to do today. And if I don't know what I'm doing, I just write it. And a lot of times I just do dialogue because dialogue fills up a page a lot faster. So I just write it wrong. And then I've done those 5 pages, and then the next day I go, and maybe half a page is good. And I take that half a page, and then I write 4.5 bad pages. And then someday, somewhere, maybe, I'll get a book.
Do you know the John Irving quote? There's this great John Irving quote where he says, if while you're writing, if you don't feel like you're humiliating yourself, then you're not writing hard enough.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel like you're about to drop dead, then you're not doing it properly. Well, I love that quote so much that I tracked John Irving down.
Yep.
I had to go through his wife, who's his literary editor, and I wrote him this letter saying, oh, this quote is so important to me. And he actually wrote me back. He wrote me a 3-page handwritten letter. He said he answered me because I was the first person in 2 years who wasn't asking him for something. But he also said, I never said that. It's all over the internet, and I never said it. And he said, but it is something that I might have said. So I told him I was going to spread the word that he said it anyway. But it's a really great quote because that's what it's like to write. I always feel like when you're at the state where you're scared and you feel like you can't do it, that's when you do really good stuff, right?
Or you do really bad stuff that then you rewrite 5 times and then maybe it gets a little better.
Does do you ever feel that you want to stay in the world you created and that you miss it when it's gone?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Way too much.
But it's also both.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, I can't wait to get rid of these people. I just want this book to end. I've rewritten it 20 times. I'm done with this.
Right.
And then my editor says it's ready to go into production, and I open up a bottle of champagne, and then the next day it's like, now what? Where are they? Now what do I do?
That's my next question. When do you start writing your next book? Because I always start when I'm halfway through another book, just so I won't freak out over the first book.
Well, I handed in this draft to my editor and started researching the next book, which scares me even more than this book.
Oh, I love it.
This one is so scary. I have
Can
idea if
Can you say what it's about? You can email me. Email me later and tell me
it's it hasn't gestated at all, but it's gestated enough to scare the shit out of me.
Oh, that's great. That's
Yeah,
great.
see, this is how crazy we are. She
Yeah,
thinks it's great, and part of me thinks, yeah, that's great too, even I have no idea how I can possibly pull this off.
You will. You will. Okay, so the 2 questions I always ask, what's obsessing you now and why? And what are you doing about it? And the last question is, what question should I be absolutely mortified that I forgot to ask you?
Well, I don't think there's any question. You should be mortified at not asking. When you ask about the obsession question, are you talking about writing? Or
Anything,
are we talking about,
anything that's
you
impacting
really
you.
want the answer to that?
Yeah. I know what it is. I know what it
The
is.
political situation today, that's
Right.
all I'm going to say, which becomes very hard to push away. But I will say that writing, I'm really looking forward to starting the rewrite of this book so I can get lost in it and get away from what's going on in the world. Because that's the best thing about writing, is getting in the zone, and you're there and you turn around and it's 5 hours later and you have no idea where that time went.
Right.
You got pages, and the world doesn't matter. And,
No, it's great.
It doesn't matter that your house isn't selling. It doesn't matter who the president is. All that matters is the work. So it's a fabulous escape.
Right. And is there anything else that you would have liked to have talked about that I didn't ask you?
I think we should ask the audience if they have any questions to ask him.
Okay. We're opening it up now for questions for Barbara.
Hold on a minute.
Hello.
Okay, hi.
Okay. Um, well, way back earlier in the conversation when you were talking about forgery, there was a wonderful New Yorker cartoon that just had the names of the artists and these people standing there going, and the question is, what's the value of the name and knowing it's money. It was almost like they were standing in a museum and it was just Matisse, Picasso, Renoir, and only the name, not the painting.
And, Albert Barnes, even though he was a crazy guy, he was a wonderful curator, and he also would not allow little white cards next to the art in his wasn't a museum then, his sort of museum, because he didn't want people to just look at the name of the painting, look at the year, and look at who painted it. He wanted people to look at the painting and actually engage with it. And so, the names count and the money counts. It's huge. But that's the flip side of that question. If you can still enjoy the painting, does it have value? Not monetary.
In the Art Forger, it's clear that you did an extensive amount of research in terms of Degas' painting style and his methodology. And I was just curious, because that's like such a broad topic. How do you whittle that down to find out the most important things that you need to convey in that novel to really, represent what it would take to make that forgery?
Well, this is an interesting question about research for historical fiction. You do a lot of, is this working? Yeah. So you do a lot of research. I shouldn't have touched it. And so I'm an academic by training, and so I was trained to do research, but I'm sure there's a few academics in the room here. And if you do academic research, you have to go to every person who has breathed on your subject, and we've got the footnotes and the bibliography and all of that stuff. But when you do research for a novel, you just research until you're not interested anymore, and then you make the rest of it up. But even with that, I would say for the Art Forger or the Muralist or the Collector's Apprentice, only maybe the top 15% of the research that I did is in the book. We have a saying in my writers group, your research is showing. So it is a very difficult and, we're talking drafts to get rid of all the things that I'm personally interested in, but are going to, another thing that we talk about in my writers group is an eye bump, which is something that pops the reader out of your book. And you don't want to do that. And too much research does that. So it's a very fine balance of what you've learned from your research and how much you're going to put into the book and how much a reader is going to appreciate. So it takes a long time to make that work.
Hi there. This is kind of an out-of-the-box question, but I noticed that you originally used your first name when you were writing, and now it's BA, like A.S. Byatt or P.D. James or J.K. Rowling. Exactly like that. I'm just wondering what that choice was like for you, how you decided to go in that direction.
Well, it's a very interesting question because a lot of people think that we did it because we wanted to make it like I was a man, not a woman. But as soon as you pick up the books and you open the flap, there's a picture of me and I don't really look like a man. So I wrote 5 books before I wrote, 5 published books. I wrote 9 books before The Art Forger, 5 of which were published, that nobody read. And the first thing that bookstores and librarians do when a new book comes out is they go back and look at your history. Has that book circulated in their library? They sold your books in their bookstores, and those are all written under Barbara. And Barbara had a really bad track record. So I switched publishers, went to Algonquin Books, which is both of our publishers who we love. And the marketing director said, why don't we change your name? Because if we do, B.A. Shapiro will have no numbers. And they won't be able to say, I'm not going to order these books because your books didn't sell last time. And it worked beautifully. So then those books have been they were all dead, and they weren't available anymore. Now they've been reissued, and I reissued them under BA. Do you want me to call on somebody?
And any other questions?
Sorry, I promised last one. I said I promised last one. No, I was just curious because you were talking about your background being in statistics and statistical analysis. So it seems like such a big leap from that to writing. So I was wondering what made you decide that you really wanted to be a writer after you had obviously gone through a lot of education for that background.
Well, I always wanted to be a writer. I just didn't think I could make a living as a writer. So I became a sociologist thinking I could make a living at that, which also wasn't such a great idea. But, I learned later that it was better than being a writer. So I was working all of these different jobs, and I had this big high-pressure job. I was running the Boston office of a software development company, and I had 2 kids, and I was having lunch with my mother one day, and I'm whining to her, as daughters are wont to do. And I said, I can't do this. I can't be Superwoman, but if I'm not Superwoman, I don't know who I am. And she said, if you had one life to live, 1 year to live, what would you do? And I said, I would write a novel and spend more time with my kids. So I quit my job. Fortunately, I had a working spouse with benefits, and I wrote a novel that didn't get published. And then I wrote 5 more that did that nobody read. And then I wrote 3 more that didn't get published. And then finally, I wrote The Art Forger, and everything changed.
Any other questions?
I want to put together 2 parts of this interview. I love Caroline's question about what did you learn from your own book when you finished writing it, and your comment about the 7 characters who emerged on your fingertips while you were trying to figure out the next book. And I wondered if you ascribe characteristics to those 7, what you learned, if you can ascribe to those 7 characters who appeared to you from people you know, from your family members, and how scary is that?
Well, it's interesting. For me, when I start creating characters, I often do have a person in mind. But what happens really quickly as they get meshed into the story is they change so much that they're not really like those people anymore, which is a good thing, because you really don't want your family members and your friends to be in a book. Although I will also say that generally people don't recognize themselves, especially if they're the bad guy. They're like one of my early books. I had created a bad guy character who was based on the husband of one of my friends. And I messed it up so you didn't know exactly who it was. But she reads the book and she goes, "I can't believe you created a character based on Danny." And I'm like, "Oh God, this is terrible." And she said, she took the hero character. She said, "Yeah, he has a crack in his front tooth, just like Danny." She had no idea that Danny was the bad guy. So that saves you a little bit from that. So,
I was wondering what drew you into the art world. Clearly that wasn't your background.
well, before I wanted to be a writer, I wanted to be an artist. And my parents were very supportive. And my father built me a little studio in the corner of the basement, and my mother took me to art classes. But unfortunately, it became clear really early on that this was not where my talents lay. So I became an art appreciator. And so I have a lot of friends who are artists. I always go to museums and galleries, and I'm an art collector myself, although I can't afford, a lot of fancy art, but I buy the art that I like. And so I mentioned that I had written 3 books that didn't get published, and I was thinking of not writing anymore. And I came up with an idea for a new career. I was talking to my husband about it. And he said, "You don't want to do that. You want to write another book," which of course I did. And he was my working spouse with benefits, so why not listen to him? And he also said, "Why don't you write the book of your heart? Don't forget about it." He's trying to write in certain genres and all this kind of stuff. He said, "Just write a book of your heart." Of course, I had no idea what a book of my heart might be, but then I thought, art. That's what I really care about and I'm really interested in. And so that's what I did. And that book, I loved writing, and it went well. So I thought, I'll write another one. And then that one I loved writing, and it went well. So I thought, I'll write another one. And then I thought, maybe I should write something different. But I couldn't keep the art out of it. I tried, but I couldn't do it.
I think we have time for your one last question, but before that, does anyone have a gray Subaru Outback in the parking lot? Because you are blocking several cars in, and we do need you to move it right away. All right, next question. Sorry.
Hi. So you mentioned, you was touched on that you have a forgery or a copy prominently in your house, and I'm kind of curious, what is it of, and what drew you to it, and what about it brings you pleasure? Because that's just such an odd thing, because you look at it, and every time you look at it, you know, well, that isn't Picasso.
Did I say I have a forgery in my house?
You have to take pictures,
Oh, I
especially
do.
for the
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Craig did it.
Yeah.
I do. It's so when the book came out, the director of marketing at Algonquin bought a fake Degas, and he set it up at the booth at BEA, the Book Expo of America, and then he sent it around to bookstores everywhere where I was speaking. And I took it from the last bookstore that had it, and I do have it hanging in my house, and it is obviously a forgery, a really bad one. And I love it because it has so many pleasant memories. It's a painting, yeah. It's a painting of a bather, and in Degas style, with one of those really, horrible Victorian frames that those paintings are always in. I will tell you, it is in the bathroom in my study.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Let's give Caroline and BA a warm round of applause. And before you go about your evening, please visit the Watchung Booksellers table. Thank you.